everyone. My name's Sydnie Christmas.
Is it?
Sydnie
Yeah. That's an unbelievable name. I love that.
It's terrible, isn't it?
She stepped on stage with a trembling voice and walked off a legend. But what if I told you the most powerful moment in Britain's Got Talent 2024 wasn't what you saw on screen, but everything they didn't show you? Sydnie Christmas. A name that lit up headlines after her Golden Buzzer performance seemed like an overnight sensation. But behind that show-stopping rendition of Tomorrow, behind the tears and confetti, lies a story of rejection, heartbreak, sacrifice, and survival. A story the producers conveniently trimmed for time. Why was Sydnie ready to quit music entirely, just weeks before auditioning? What secret connection did she have to the theater world that sparked controversy across social media? And what role did her silent, behind-the-scenes partner play in keeping her dream alive? Stay with us, because once you hear the truth about Sydnie Christmas, you'll never look at talent shows the same way again. In a quiet corner of Kent, nestled along the Thames, a young girl with a golden voice began turning living rooms into concert halls long before cameras ever found her. Sydnie Christmas, born and raised in Gravesend, didn't need a spotlight to shine. From the moment she could talk, she was singing. Not for applause, but because something inside her simply had to be heard. Neighbors, teachers, even the school janitor could tell there was something different about her. Not just talent, but presence. She's got something, they'd whisper. At school events and church gatherings, she didn't just perform, she transformed the room. And yet, for all the natural flair she showed as a child, Sydnie remained grounded. While some kids dreamed of being pop stars for the fame, she sang because it made her feel alive. In a town that rarely makes headlines, Sydnie found small stages to grow on. Talent shows, school plays, local recitals. She didn't chase the limelight, she created it. And though she wasn't born into showbiz or surrounded by celebrity, Gravesend gave her something just as powerful: grit, humility, and a deep-rooted love for performing. It was in those humble beginnings, not a talent agency or TV set, that the voice we'd all come to know was quietly, patiently being shaped. But Sydnie's story didn't stay in Kent. The spark that started in a childhood bedroom was about to ignite something much bigger. Because as she got older, it became clear, singing in Gravesend was just the beginning, and the leap she was about to make would change everything. As her teenage years unfolded, Sydnie Christmas made a bold decision that would alter the trajectory of her life. She enrolled in the D&B Academy of Performing Arts, a place where raw talent was forged into mastery. It wasn't glamorous, it was grueling. Picture this: 6-hour days of vocal drills, choreography that left bruises, critiques that cut deep, all in service of one goal: excellence. Here, Sydnie didn't just learn to sing, she learned to perform. She studied how to command a stage with her eyes, how to make silence feel louder than a scream, how to turn lyrics into lived experience. It was during these formative years that Sydnie discovered something crucial. That technique was only part of the equation. The real magic? That came from honesty, vulnerability, storytelling. And as fate would have it, her timing was impeccable. Because just as she was emerging from the crucible of training, an opportunity came knocking that few could even dream of. Lazarus, the haunting, surreal musical, co-written by the late David Bowie, was casting for its West End production. A girl from Gravesend, this wasn't just a role, it was a portal. Sydnie auditioned with the fire of someone who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. And they saw it. They saw her. Landing a part in Lazarus at the King's Cross Theatre wasn't just validation, it was transformation. Sydnie wasn't just another hopeful anymore. She was now part of something legendary, sharing a stage with seasoned professionals in a production that pulsed with creativity and risk. But even in that spotlight, she stayed hungry. She soaked up everything. Every note, every cue, every whisper of applause. This was her classroom now, a masterclass in poise, stamina, and presence. And while most rising stars might crumble under the pressure of such a debut, Sydnie didn't flinch. She rose. The girl from Kent had arrived. And yet, even as Lazarus lifted her profile, Sydnie knew this wasn't the finish line. It was just another step. What she did next would take her far from the London stage and into uncharted waters, literally. After the glow of the West End, most would expect Sydnie Christmas to chase another London stage, but she had other plans. In a move that surprised even those close to her, Sydnie took her talents offshore, quite literally, joining the cast of Royal Caribbean's high-profile cruise ship productions. And while it may sound like a detour, this chapter became one of the most defining in her journey. These weren't your average cruise ship shows. These were Broadway-caliber performances on floating cities, with full audiences every night and pressure that rivaled any land-based theater. Sydnie took on lead roles, most notably as Rizzo in Grease, a part that demands both swagger and soul. Night after night, she belted out "There are worse things I could do," with a ferocity that silenced even the rowdiest vacation crowds. But that wasn't all. In the Muse Starwater, she played the youngest muse in a dreamy, abstract production that pushed her into new artistic territory. No scripts to hide behind, no cuts between takes, just raw, unfiltered performance. And the grind was real. Back-to-back shows, shifting venues, adapting to new audiences and acoustics every single night. But with every sail from one port to another, Sydnie was sharpening her edge, learning how to captivate a room full of strangers from different corners of the world. While the public back home remained unaware, Sydnie was quietly evolving into a world-class performer. She was logging the kind of stage hours few contestants on Britain's Got Talent could dream of. And perhaps most importantly, she was building a resilience that no classroom could teach. Because when the waves got rough, literally and metaphorically, she kept going. Through seasickness, sore throats, and sleepless nights, Sydnie sang. And with every note, she laid another brick in the foundation of a career that was far from over. But what happened next wasn't a gig. It was a test. Because the next role would push her not just as a performer, but as a survivor. When Sydnie Christmas stepped off the cruise ship circuit, she didn't slow down. She sped up. Her next destination, Bochum, Germany. The mission? Join the cast of Starlight Express, one of the most technically demanding musicals in the world. Performed entirely on roller skates, with high-speed choreography and intense vocal demands, the show is infamous for chewing up even the most seasoned performers. But Sydnie? She signed up with no hesitation. At first, she didn't land a headlining role. Instead, she became what the industry calls a swing, the unsung hero of the stage. It meant learning multiple roles, memorizing countless lines, cues, and blocking. One night, she'd be Belle the bar car. The next, carry the luggage, car. And at any given moment, she had to be ready to perform with zero warning. It was a mental and physical tightrope walk. But she didn't just balance, she soared. Over time, Sydnie earned named roles, applause, and the respect of her castmates. Yet it wasn't just professional growth that defined this chapter. Behind the scenes, something far more personal was blooming. In the middle of the chaos and curtain calls, she met Max Rizzo, a fellow performer whose dedication matched her own. Their chemistry was instant, their connection undeniable. As the months turned to years, the bond deepened. Together, they endured 4 grueling years of performances, language barriers, and endless rehearsals. But Max wasn't just her co-star, he became her anchor. Through career highs and crushing rejections, he stood by her side, not as a savior, but as a partner, believing in her when she questioned herself. The two built a quiet, unshakable support system in the harshest of environments. While audiences cheered the onstage magic, behind the scenes was a love story forged in shared ambition, hardship, and unwavering loyalty. When the final curtain in Bochum came down, Sydnie and Max packed more than costumes. They packed a dream, one they carried back to London. But the city that once felt full of promise now felt different. Rejections piled up, finances tightened, hope began to flicker. The grind hadn't let up, it had grown heavier. And with her back to the wall, Sydnie made a decision that would define everything. One final shot, one audition, one chance. Britain's Got Talent. What no one saw coming was how close she came to walking away. When Sydnie Christmas returned to London with Max by her side and years of international experience under her belt, she believed the timing was finally right. She wasn't a fresh graduate anymore. She was a seasoned performer, ready to take her place on the West End stage. But the city had other plans. London's theater scene, known for its brilliance, is also brutally unforgiving. Audition after audition, Sydnie poured her soul into roles that slipped through her fingers. No callbacks, no offers, just silence. And the silence, over time, began to speak louder than applause ever had. Her dreams were no longer just on hold, they were teetering on extinction. To make ends meet, Sydnie picked up a 0-hour contract at a local gym, manning the front desk while her heart ached to be on stage. The days blurred into one another. Early shifts, late-night rehearsals, rent deadlines, and a mounting sense of invisibility. Meanwhile, friends around her were moving forward. Engagements, babies, careers flourishing. And there she was, handing out towels and wondering if she was clinging to a dream that didn't want her back. It was more than a slump. It was a spiritual reckoning. The kind that strips you down and forces the question, do I still belong here? And one night, in a conversation soaked with exhaustion and honesty, Sydnie laid it all bare. She was ready to give it up. The stage, the auditions, the heartbreak, all of it. She had one audition left in her. Just one. If it didn't work, she'd walk away for good. That audition? Britain's Got Talent. But this wasn't a grab for fame or a desperate leap for TV exposure. It was a final plea to be heard, to be seen by someone, anyone, who could understand the fire she still carried. She clicked submit on her application with shaking hands, barely believing she'd even get a call back. And behind that, one last shot was a woman at her limit, ready to risk it all on a stage that could either save her or be her swan song. What Sydnie didn't know then was that someone else, someone quietly legendary, was about to enter her life and fan the embers back into a full-blown flame. Just when Sydnie Christmas was ready to let go of the stage she had chased for over a decade, fate, or perhaps something far more intentional, introduced her to a woman who would become a turning point in her story, Annabelle Williams. For those unfamiliar with the name, Williams is no ordinary vocal coach. She's the voice behind the voices, the woman who's helped shape the performances of stars like Sam Smith and James Arthur. But when she met Sydnie, this wasn't just another student walking through her studio doors. This was a woman carrying invisible wounds, desperate for one last chance. And Annabelle saw it. Not just the talent, the pain, the potential, the fight still burning beneath the surface. Together, they didn't just rehearse notes or work on breath control. They unpacked emotion. They rewired confidence. They asked harder questions. Why this song? What does it mean to you? What do you want people to feel when you sing it? And those questions broke Sydnie open in the best way possible. Under Annabelle's guidance, Sydnie stopped performing at people and started performing for them, with them. Every lyric became a confession. Every breath became a story. Every silence between phrases echoed the years of rejection, sacrifice, and survival that had brought her here. Their sessions weren't just technical, they were emotional surgery. And for the first time in years, Sydnie began to believe in her voice again. Not just its sound, but its truth. That's what made her BGT performance so powerful. Because when she sang Tomorrow from Annie, she wasn't delivering a theatrical number. She was telling her story, one of resilience, desperation, and fragile hope. The audience didn't just hear the song, they felt her. And none of that would have been possible without Annabelle. While the golden confetti would later shower Sydnie alone, it was Annabelle's coaching that peeled back the layers and allowed the world to hear the artist buried beneath the heartbreak. In a world obsessed with talent, Annabelle reminded her, and us, that soul still matters more. And thanks to that partnership, Sydnie was finally ready for her moment. But what came next would go far beyond a standing ovation, and straight into a national firestorm. It was a moment that stopped millions in their tracks. The lights dimmed, the crowd hushed, and Sydnie Christmas stepped onto the Britain's Got Talent stage, seemingly calm, but in reality, trembling beneath the surface. What the cameras didn't show was the storm inside her. She later confessed, "I was shaking like a leaf." And who wouldn't be? This wasn't just a performance. It was the culmination of a decade of struggle, heartbreak, and near surrender. As the first notes of Tomorrow from Annie floated through the theater, something shifted. This wasn't acting. This wasn't theater. This was truth. Every lyric dripped with lived experience, from the sleepless nights in Germany to the front desk shifts in London, from the silent rejections to the near breakdowns. Sydnie wasn't just singing about hope, she was surviving it. Live, in front of a nation, Amanda Holden's reaction said it all. Before the final note even hit, her hand slammed the golden buzzer. The crowd erupted, gold rained from the ceiling, and just like that, Sydnie's name was written into Britain's Got Talent history. But to the world watching, it looked like an overnight success. What they didn't see was the years of invisible labor. The unpaid gigs, the whispered doubts, the sacrifices no one clapped for. That performance was built on 10,000 small moments of persistence and pain. What made Sydnie's voice unforgettable wasn't just its power or control, it was its honesty. It told a story no headline could summarize, a woman who refused to disappear. As the confetti fell, Sydnie didn't just cry for joy, she cried for everything it took to get there. The girl from Gravesend, once on the verge of walking away, had been seen, heard, validated. But that golden buzzer was only the beginning. Because within hours of that viral moment, the internet started digging. And what they found would spark a controversy no one saw coming. The confetti hadn't even finished falling when the internet launched into full investigation mode. Sydnie Christmas had just delivered one of the most moving performances in Britain's Got Talent history. But within hours, the narrative began to shift. Not because of anything she said or did, but because of what she hadn't disclosed. Social media turned into a courtroom, and Sydnie's resume became Exhibit A. Posts and threads exploded. She's not an amateur. She's done Lazarus. She played Rizzo on a cruise ship. Accusations piled up. The word plant started trending. In the world of talent shows, being labeled a plant, someone secretly placed by producers to win, is the ultimate sin. And now, Sydnie was caught in that storm. People didn't just question her talent, they questioned her right to be there. How could someone with years of professional experience still be painted as an underdog? Critics pointed to the show's editing, the carefully crafted underdog story, and, most controversially, the fact that Sydnie was given the coveted final performance slot in the finale. For many, it felt too perfectly orchestrated. The whispers of favoritism grew louder. And then came Simon Cowell's well-intended but poorly received comment, "None of them are professionals." The backlash was immediate. Viewers pushed back. If Sydnie's not a professional, then what are West End credits? Instead of calming the flames, Simon's statement added fuel to a narrative that the show had bent its own rules. But here's where the story turns. While online critics built a case against her, Sydnie stayed remarkably grounded. In interviews after the show, she called the backlash soul-destroying. She admitted she was overwhelmed and devastated by how quickly the joy of her moment had been stolen. "I've said my truth," she stated firmly. "Saying it's not genuine is questioning me." And that hit hard, because behind every gotcha tweet was a real person. A woman who had fought for years to be seen. A woman who had reached the brink and clawed her way back, only to be told she didn't belong. Instead of spiraling, Sydnie did something bold. She set boundaries. "There's nothing I can do to change their minds," she said. "So I've had to separate myself." And then, in the most understated power move, she went to social media not with a rant, but with a reminder. "You don't know me, or the fierce backbone I have. You cannot touch us." It wasn't defiance, it was survival. With the support of her friends, her fans, and the quiet strength of Max Rizzo behind her, Sydnie didn't retreat. She stood taller, and in doing so, she reminded the world that sometimes, the greatest performances don't happen under stage lights. They happen when no one's watching, and you choose to keep going anyway. But even after the dust settled, one question remained. Was the backlash the price of success, or proof that Sydnie Christmas had struck a nerve deeper than anyone expected? When the curtains closed and the tabloids moved on, what remained wasn't just a trophy or a title. It was the undeniable truth that Sydnie Christmas had earned every moment. Not through shortcuts or staged miracles, but through relentless grit, quiet grace, and a refusal to break even when the world gave her every reason to. While critics dissected her resume and conspiracy theories echoed across forums, Sydnie stayed focused on what truly mattered: the work, the craft, and the heart that fueled it all. Because long before she sang her way into millions of homes, she had already won something far more difficult: survival. She survived the years in Germany as a swing, constantly learning roles on the fly while skating through exhaustion and anonymity. She survived the sleepless nights on cruise ships, performing to half-listening crowds while still giving every ounce of herself to the music. She survived London's cold auditions, the deafening silence of rejection, and the kind of financial stress that has crushed brighter stars. And through it all, one thing never left her side: Max Rizzo, her partner, her lifeline, and the man who believed in her even when she doubted herself. While she stood under the glittering lights, he stood just behind the curtain, steady as ever, the quiet heartbeat of a journey that demanded everything. But what makes Sydnie's story remarkable isn't just where she ended up, it's the journey she took to get there. She didn't arrive on a wave of luck. She climbed, fell, got back up, and climbed again. And in that struggle, she became more than a performer. She became a symbol for anyone who's ever been told, "Not this time." Anyone who's ever questioned if they still had the strength to try again. Her win on Britain's Got Talent wasn't just a TV moment. It was a message. You can fall apart and still come back stronger. You can be doubted and still deliver. You can be invisible for years and still be unforgettable in 2 minutes flat. As the spotlight now follows her into new opportunities, albums, stages, interviews, Sydnie doesn't carry herself like a star. She carries herself like someone who knows exactly what it costs to get here. And maybe that's why her story sticks. Because beneath the applause and the golden confetti is a woman who bled for her dream and never once let the noise drown out the music inside her. So as the world waits to see what Sydnie Christmas does next, one thing is certain: her voice isn't going anywhere. Not because a buzzer made it famous, but because life made it unbreakable. So now you know, Sydnie Christmas wasn't just another golden buzzer story. She was the woman who nearly walked away, the artist who battled silence and scrutiny, and the voice that turned years of struggle into 2 minutes of soul-shaking brilliance. From Gravesend to Germany, from cruise ships to casting calls, from rejections to a nation's ovation, Sydnie's rise wasn't built on hype, it was built on heart. And while the cameras have moved on, her journey is just beginning. Because true stars don't burn out when the show ends, they shine even brighter when no one's watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you see talent in a whole new light, Don't forget to hit that like button. Drop a comment below. What part of Sydnie's journey hit you the hardest? And if you're hungry for more untold stories, hidden struggles, and the truth behind the spotlight, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell, because the next story we tell might just be the one no one else dared to reveal.